before existence had form, before matter knew substance, before the first breath stirred the void, there was only Brahman, the infinite, eternal, unchanging reality that transcends all description. Neither being nor non-being, neither light nor darkness, this ultimate truth existed beyond the grasp of thought itself. From this boundless awareness would emerge the great drama that encompasses all of creation, preservation, and destruction across infinite cycles of time. Time itself moved differently in this primordial state. Instead of flowing forward in a straight line, it turned in vast wheels, endless cycles within cycles, each containing eons of unfathomable duration. The largest wheel, called a kalpa, spanned over 4 billion years, divided into 1,000 smaller cycles. Each of these cycles contained 4 distinct ages: the golden Satya Yuga, when righteousness flourished, the declining Treta Yuga, the darkening Dvapara Yuga, and the final Kali Yuga of spiritual darkness. Within this framework operated another division called the Manvantara, periods lasting over 300 million years. 14 such periods completed one great cycle, each presided over by a different Manu, the archetypal first man, who guided humanity through that particular epoch. These overlapping wheels ensured that the universe never truly ended, but transformed continuously, like an eternal breath inhaling and exhaling, worlds across measureless eternities. At the heart of this machinery stood 3 forces that governed all activity. Sattva drew all things toward harmony and illumination. Rajas drove change, passion, and the restless energy that propelled everything forward. Tamas brought rest, inertia, and the necessary destruction that cleared space for new birth. These 3 gunas wove through every aspect of reality, like threads, their ever-shifting combinations determining the character of each age and the nature of all beings within them. From Brahman's mysterious depths emerged the first manifestation, Brahma, the 4-headed creator, whose very presence transformed the void into possibility. Unlike the abstract Brahman, which remained forever beyond attributes, Brahma appeared as a personality capable of thought, intention, and action. His 4 faces gazed simultaneously in all directions, while his 4 arms worked through multiple forces at once. A surge of unmatched beauty marked the beginning of the great work. From the navel of Vishnu, who floated in meditative rest upon the endless ocean, grew a golden lotus of incomparable splendor. This was no ordinary flower, but the very womb of manifestation itself. Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg from which all possibilities would emerge. Upon this lotus sat Brahma, awakening to his purpose with the dawn of the first day. The ocean stretched without beginning or end, an infinite expanse of pure potentiality. These were not the limited seas known to earthly experience, but the fundamental substance from which all matter and energy would eventually crystallize. Floating upon these timeless waters lay Ananta Shesha, the 1,000-headed serpent whose coils supported not merely Vishnu, but the entire structure of reality. Each of Shesha's heads chanted continuously, creating a symphony that maintained the very fabric of the universe. As Brahma contemplated his mission, the first sound emerged from his awareness, the primordial vibration, Aum. Within its 3 syllables lay the entire blueprint of what was to come. The A represented the waking state and the physical universe. The U symbolized the dream state and subtle realms, while the M encompassed deep sleep and pure awareness itself. The silence following these sounds pointed beyond all manifestation to eternal Brahman. This sacred sound became the frequency upon which all reality would be built. From this primal vibration emerged the 5 elements that would combine to form every conceivable object and being. Space provided the arena for all activity, its infinite emptiness pregnant with potential. Air brought the first movement and breath, the vital force that would animate all living creatures. Fire contributed transformative power, heat and light that enabled change and perception. Water offered flowing, adaptable qualities that allowed life to flourish. Earth provided stable foundation upon which structures could be built and forms could maintain their integrity. For this cosmic engineering project, Brahma called forth the Saptarishis, 7 primordial sages whose awareness was so pure and vast that they could serve as the very architects of reality. These were not merely wise beings, but fundamental principles personified, each responsible for establishing specific laws that would govern the created world. Their meditative power became the foundation upon which physical and metaphysical laws rested, ensuring that everything would unfold according to intelligence rather than chance. Under their guidance, the blueprint began taking concrete form. Countless realms emerged, 14 distinct planes of existence, each vibrating at different frequencies. The highest realms, including Satyaloka, where Brahma himself resided, consisted of pure awareness, barely clothed in the most subtle matter. The middle realms blended awareness and matter in complex interactions that allowed for rich experiences of pleasure and pain, learning and forgetting, success and failure. The lowest realms consisted primarily of dense matter animated by awareness, so contracted that beings there experienced primarily suffering and limitation. Within these realms emerged the first conscious beings, devas and asuras, gods and demons whose purpose centered on maintaining the fundamental polarities that drive all activity. The devas embodied forces of harmony, growth, illumination, and integration. Led by figures like Indra, the Storm King, Agni, fire's transformative power, and Varuna, the guardian of order and law, they worked to establish structures that allowed awareness to evolve toward greater wisdom and compassion. The Asuras represented equally necessary but opposite forces: disintegration, rebellion, ignorance, and entropy. Though often characterized as demons, they served the essential function of providing resistance and challenge. Without their opposition, the devas would have no arena in which to develop their powers, and awareness would stagnate in comfortable but ultimately stifling harmony. The dynamic tension between these forces became the engine that drove all evolution. Creation bore the imprint of this primal duality in countless expressions. Light defined itself against darkness. Pleasure gained meaning through contrast with pain. Order became significant only in relationship to chaos. The intelligence behind everything deliberately built in this tension, because awareness could evolve only through encountering and transcending limitations. The interplay between opposing forces created the complex rhythms and patterns that made existence dynamic rather than static. As everything took shape, one event emerged as pivotal for establishing the rules that would govern all future activity: Samudra Manthan, the churning of the primordial ocean. This extraordinary enterprise required cooperation between the normally antagonistic devas and asuras, who had to work together to extract the nectar of immortality hidden in the ocean's depths. Mount Mandara served as the churning rod, while Vasuki, the king of serpents, became the rope wound around the mountain. The devas grasped one end of the serpent, while the asuras held the other, and together they began the rhythmic churning that would extract treasures from the waters. This cooperation produced marvels beyond imagination: the physician of the gods, the wish-fulfilling tree, the goddess of wealth, the nectar of immortality, and ultimately, the power that would activate all of reality. From this churning emerged Lakshmi, the goddess whose presence brought prosperity, beauty, and abundance wherever she appeared. Her emergence from the waters signaled that the universe was not merely an exercise in engineering, but an expression of love and generosity. Everything existed not because it had to, but because the supreme awareness delighted in sharing its infinite nature through countless forms and experiences. Halahala, born of the ocean's churning, is a poison so intense it could obliterate all manifestation before it has the chance to emerge. In this crisis, Shiva stepped forward without hesitation, drinking the poison and holding it in his throat to prevent either his destruction or its escape. His throat turned blue from this supreme sacrifice, earning him the name Nilakantha. This act revealed that destruction, properly understood, was not creation's opposite, but its necessary partner. The willingness to absorb darkness so that light could continue shining. When Dhanvantari, the physician of the gods, emerged carrying a golden pot containing the precious Amrita, it triggered the final crisis. The Asuras immediately attempted to seize the nectar for themselves. Battle erupted as both sides fought desperately for control of immortality itself. Vishnu intervened with a strategy that revealed the subtle intelligence governing all events. He manifested as Mohini, a female form of such overwhelming beauty that even the battle-hardened Asuras stopped fighting to gaze upon her in wonder. Using their momentary distraction, she offered to distribute the Amrita fairly between both sides. Enchanted by her beauty, the Asuras consented to let Mohini distribute the nectar, but she distributed it only to the Devas, ensuring that the forces of harmony and evolution gained immortality, while those of chaos and destruction remained subject to death. One Asura, Rahu, disguised himself among the Devas and managed to taste the nectar before the sun and moon exposed his deception. Vishnu immediately decapitated him, but since the Amrita had already touched his throat, Rahu became immortal as a disembodied head, forever seeking revenge by periodically swallowing the sun and moon during eclipses. This event established crucial laws that would govern all subsequent ages. Cooperation between opposing factions, though difficult and temporary, could produce results impossible for either side alone. Great treasures always came with great risks and demanded sustained effort to obtain. Most importantly, the forces of preservation and harmony, while not inherently more powerful than those of destruction and chaos, possessed a subtle intelligence that could turn apparent defeats into ultimate victories. As the fundamental structures crystallized, the roles of the three primary forces became clearly defined. Brahma, having completed the initial work, retreated into the background. His active phase temporarily concluded. His role resembled that of an architect who designs a magnificent building. Once construction begins, other specialists take over daily management. Vishnu emerged as the active preserver, whose awareness permeated and sustained all created forms. His role extended far beyond passive maintenance to include direct intervention whenever balance was threatened. Unlike Brahma, whose creative work occurred in great bursts at the beginning of cycles, Vishnu's preserving activity continued constantly throughout everything, like a physician monitoring the health of reality itself. Shiva embodied the force of dissolution that cleared away outworn forms to make space for new birth. His destructive power operated not from malice or anger, but from compassion, recognizing that awareness trapped in limiting structures could not evolve until those limitations were dissolved. His dance maintained the universe in constant motion, preventing the stagnation that would occur if any form became permanently fixed. In perfect coordination, these three forces merged much like primary colors, forming an infinite spectrum of hues. Their cooperation ensured that everything remained dynamic and evolutionary, rather than static and fixed. The interplay between their functions created the complex rhythms and patterns that made existence both challenging and beautiful, difficult and rewarding, temporary and eternal. Dharma emerged not as an external law imposed upon reality, but as the very intelligence woven into the fabric of everything. Like gravity in the physical realm, it operated as a force that kept everything aligned with its highest purpose. When beings acted in harmony with Dharma, they experienced fulfillment, growth, and happiness. When they violated these patterns, they encountered obstacles, suffering, and limitation. This feedback system ensured that awareness naturally evolved toward greater wisdom and compassion through experience. Setting up Dharma required careful calibration. Too much order would create a static, lifeless universe where awareness could not evolve. Too much chaos would prevent any stable structures from forming, making coherent experience impossible. The intelligence threaded the needle perfectly, creating a universe dynamic enough to permit growth, yet stable enough to allow beings to learn from their experiences. By establishing these forces, the foundation was set for all future activity. The stage was now set for the emergence of specific personalities who would guide and protect reality through its various phases. The basic laws had been established, the essential structures put in place, and the mechanisms of balance activated. The next phase would see the emergence of individual beings whose personalities and powers would shape the specific character of each age. The Great Order had been established, but the drama of existence was only beginning to unfold. With reality's framework established and Dharma's laws set in motion, abstract forces transformed into vivid personalities. Creation, preservation, and destruction took on distinct characters, abilities, and desires that would drive the great drama across countless millennia. Gods walked among mortals during this age. Demons challenged heaven itself, and the universe's very structure hung in balance through epic conflicts that determined the fate of all beings. Vritra, the serpent of drought and obstruction, coiled himself around heaven's waters, preventing life-giving rains from reaching earth below. This primordial entity stretched across the sky like a living drought, his scales impervious to normal weapons, his presence turning fertile lands into barren wastes. Rivers dried up, crops withered, and entire kingdoms faced starvation as the serpent tightened his grip on the waters of life. Indra, storm lord and king of the Devas, rode his white elephant Airavata into battle against this enemy of all living things. Armed with Vajra, the thunderbolt forged from the bones of sage Dadichi, he hurled lightning bolts that split mountains and shook the foundations of earth and heaven. The battle raged across multiple dimensions as Indra's weapon clashed against Vritra's seemingly impenetrable defenses. Thunder rolled continuously as the two titans fought. Where Vritra's breath touched the air, it turned poisonous. Where Indra's lightning struck, new springs burst from rock. The very elements joined this conflict. Wind howled to support the storm god, while darkness gathered around the serpent of stagnation. When Indra finally pierced Vritra's defenses and released the captive waters, torrential rains fell for 7 days and 7 nights, washing away the accumulated dust of drought and bringing new life to the dying world. Yet victory came at a terrible cost. Vritra, despite his destructive actions, was also a Brahmin, a member of the priestly class. His death stained Indra with the sin of Brahminicide, forcing the king of gods to flee and hide until purification could be achieved. For months, Indra wandered in disguise, tormented by guilt and stripped of his divine radiance. Only through elaborate penances and the intervention of other gods could he eventually reclaim his throne and restore his power. War between Devas and Asuras soon expanded beyond individual conflicts to encompass a struggle for creation's most precious substance, Amrita, the nectar of immortality. This golden elixir, hidden in the primordial ocean's depths, promised freedom from death itself. Whichever side possessed it would tip the balance of power permanently in their favor. Acquiring Amrita required unprecedented cooperation between the normally antagonistic factions. Mount Mandara was uprooted to serve as a churning rod. Then Vasuki, king of serpents, volunteered his body as rope. Devas grasped the serpent's tail, and Asuras held his head as they began the churning that would extract unimaginable treasures from the ocean's depths. The mountains spun like a vast drill, boring into waters, while waves larger than continents crashed against its slopes. As the churning intensified, wonders began emerging from the roiling waters. Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow, rose gracefully from the foam, her udders flowing with milk that could satisfy any desire. The Parijata tree followed, its blossoms releasing fragrances that could transport anyone to realms of pure bliss. Uchaishravas, the seven-headed horse, galloped across the waves with speed that could outrun time itself. Then came Lakshmi, goddess of wealth and prosperity, rising from the waters like dawn breaking over the horizon. Her beauty surpassed all description. Where she stepped, lotus flowers bloomed. Where she looked, gems materialized. Where she smiled, the very air shimmered with golden light. She chose Vishnu as her eternal consort, establishing a partnership that would ensure prosperity always accompanied preservation and protection. But the ocean's depths also contained darker treasures. Halahala, the poison of dissolution, erupted from the waters with such toxicity that it threatened to dissolve all creation before the Amrita could be retrieved. This was poison in its absolute form, not merely harmful to individual beings, but capable of unraveling reality's very fabric. Merely breathing its fumes began corrupting the elements, turning air into acid and water into liquid fire. Without hesitation, Shiva stepped forward and consumed the poison, holding it in his throat to prevent either his destruction or its escape to contaminate creation. His throat turned blue from this supreme sacrifice, earning him the name Nilakantha, the blue-throated one. As the poison burned within him, his wife Parvati quickly pressed her hand against his throat to prevent the toxin from spreading further through his body. Finally, Dhanvantari, physician of the gods, emerged carrying a golden pot containing precious Amrita. His appearance marked the churning's culmination, but also triggered the final crisis. Asuras, seeing their goal within reach, immediately attempted seizing the nectar for themselves. Battle erupted as both sides fought desperately for immortality's control. Such conflict might have destroyed everything it was meant to preserve, but Vishnu intervened with a strategy that revealed subtle intelligence governing all events. He manifested as Mohini, a female form of such overwhelming beauty that even battle-hardened Asuras stopped fighting to gaze upon her in wonder. Her graceful movements, melodious voice, and enchanting smile bewitched everyone present. Using their momentary distraction, Mohini offered to distribute the Amrita fairly between both sides. The Asuras, completely captivated by her beauty and believing they could trust her feminine nature, agreed to let her serve the nectar, but she distributed it only to the Devas, ensuring that harmony and evolution's agents gained immortality, while chaos and destruction's agents remained subject to death. One Asura, Rahu, disguised himself among the Devas and managed to taste the nectar before the sun and moon exposed his deception. Vishnu immediately decapitated him with his discus, but since Amrita had already touched his throat, Rahu became immortal as a disembodied head. Forever seeking revenge, he periodically swallows the sun and moon in the phenomenon mortals call eclipses, though they always escape through his severed neck. By obtaining the Amrita, the Devas shifted the equilibrium throughout the celestial realms. Indra consolidated his position as king of gods, ruling from magnificent Amaravati, where seasons followed his moods and the very air sparkled with crystallized joy. His court became celestial civilization's center, where gods gathered to celebrate victories, plan strategies, and enjoy their responsibilities' fruits. Indra's character embodied authority's complexities and contradictions. As thunderbolts wielder and storms commander, he possessed strength to shatter mountains and power to command winds. His elephant, Airavata, could travel between dimensions, while his weapon, Vajra, could pierce any defense. Yet this same Indra struggled with pride, jealousy, and the intoxication that comes with supreme authority. His conflicts with sages and romantic entanglements would later reveal that even immortal status could not eliminate challenges that come with free will and desire. Agni, fire's lord, served as both destroyer and purifier, his flames capable of reducing anything to ashes, yet also transforming base materials into refined substances. His role extended beyond mere combustion to encompass all transformation. Digestion's fire converting food into energy, knowledge's fire burning away ignorance, yoga's fire purifying the soul itself. He served as messenger between realms, carrying offerings from earth to heaven and bringing inspiration down to mortals. His eternal hunger symbolized the restless energy driving all change and growth. Varuna emerged as law and moral order's guardian, his 1,000 eyes seeing everything occurring throughout creation. Unlike human law enforcement, which could only observe and punish external actions, Varuna's jurisdiction extended to thoughts, intentions, and every deed's subtle consequences. He bound transgressors with ropes that no weapon could cut, yet also possessed the power to release those who genuinely repented and sought purification. His domain over waters represented the flowing, adaptive quality needed to maintain justice across vastly different circumstances and beings. Among the goddesses, Saraswati embodied wisdom and creative expression in their purest forms. She flowed like a river through awareness's landscape, bringing inspiration, knowledge, and artistic beauty wherever she passed. Her Veena produced music that could awaken dormant potentials in any being, while her swan could separate truth from falsehood with unerring discrimination. Students and artists worshipped her as the source of all learning and creativity, recognizing that knowledge without wisdom becomes mere information, and art without inspiration becomes simple craft. Lakshmi represented another aspect of the feminine, the energy that brings abundance, prosperity, and material well-being. But her gifts extended far beyond mere wealth to encompass all forms of positive manifestation. Where she placed her attention, crops grew abundantly, businesses flourished, relationships thrived, and communities prospered. Her alliance with Vishnu established that preservation and prosperity must work together. Sustainable abundance requires wise stewardship, while genuine preservation demands adequate resources. Great goddess Durga revealed the feminine in its most dynamic and protective aspect. When challenges arose that even male deities could not handle, she manifested as the concentrated energy of all celestial forces combined. Her multiple arms wielded every god's weapons simultaneously, while her mount, a fierce lion, symbolized controlled strength that could devastate enemies while protecting devotees. Her battles against demons like Mahishasura would become legendary examples of the feminine's nurturing aspect, becoming warrior-like when her children's welfare was threatened. Shakti, feminine energy, emerged as perhaps this entire cosmology's most revolutionary concept. This was not merely the idea that goddess figures possess strength, but recognition that all energy, all activity itself was inherently feminine in nature. Male deities, for all their apparent authority, were actually inactive principles until animated by their respective Shaktis. Shiva, without his Shakti, became a lifeless corpse, while Vishnu, without Lakshmi, could not effectively preserve anything. This understanding transformed the entire theological landscape. Energy was not something possessed by masculine deities and occasionally shared with feminine ones, but rather the reverse. All activity belonged to the feminine, which occasionally manifested through masculine forms for specific purposes. This principle would later inspire entire religious movements dedicated to worshipping the goddess as ultimate reality behind all appearances. Relationship dynamics between these figures revealed complex interdependencies that would influence human relationships throughout the ages. Shiva and Parvati's partnership showed how apparent opposites, the ascetic and the engaged, the meditative and the active, the transcendent and the immanent, could complement each other perfectly. Their eternal dance represented the play between stillness and movement, witness and witnessed, that keeps the universe in motion. Vishnu and Lakshmi embodied a different model: harmony between preservation and prosperity, stability and abundance, responsibility and worldly engagement. Their relationship showed that higher realization need not require rejecting material well-being, but rather wisdom to use prosperity in service of noble purposes. Tensions frequently arose between established authority and individual ambition during this era. Sage Vishwamitra's rivalry with Vasishtha exemplified these struggles perfectly. Vishwamitra, born as a king, sought to achieve through practice what Vasishtha possessed through birth: supreme spiritual authority. His efforts were so intense that he eventually succeeded, but only after creating tremendous disturbance through his austerities. Frustrated by Vasishtha's apparent superiority, Vishwamitra escalated their rivalry to unprecedented levels. He attempted creating an entirely new heaven with himself as supreme authority. This cosmic engineering project actually succeeded. He established Trishanku in a parallel celestial realm, suspended between Earth and the traditional heavens. But it required such enormous expenditure of accumulated merit that it ultimately proved self-defeating, demonstrating that even genuine achievement could become meaningless if motivated by ego rather than service. Such struggles between sages revealed important truths about spiritual achievement and authority. Genuine accomplishment could not be simulated or forced, but required authentic inner transformation. However, such transformation was indeed possible for any being willing to pay the necessary price in sustained effort and sacrifice. Most significantly, the cosmos possessed enough flexibility to accommodate even radical innovations, though such changes always came with complex consequences. As ages progressed and righteousness gradually declined, need arose for direct intervention by preserving forces in forms that could effectively address specific challenges. Vishnu, as the cosmic preserver, accepted responsibility for incarnating whenever balance between constructive and destructive energies became too severely skewed. Rather than favoring one side, it acknowledged that sustainable life depends on baseline harmony, order, and cooperation. When destructive tendencies became so dominant that they threatened evolution and growth's very possibility, intervention became necessary to restore workable balance. The Avatar principle thus established a safety net, preventing any single age from becoming so dark that recovery became impossible. Through Amrita, the Devas achieved immortality, sparking a new evolutionary phase, while also creating novel challenges. Immortal beings, freed from death's immediate pressure, sometimes became complacent or lost touch with mortal existence's struggles. Their perspective, expanded across vast timescales, could become detached from the immediate needs of beings trapped in shorter life cycles. This tension between immortal and mortal perspectives would drive much drama in subsequent ages. Deities who had transcended certain limitations sometimes failed to understand constraints still binding other beings. Their interventions, though well-intentioned, occasionally produced unintended consequences, requiring further adjustments and corrections. Order established during this age created a stable foundation for all subsequent development, but it was dynamic stability, requiring constant maintenance and occasional dramatic intervention. Dharma provided the guidelines, deities provided enforcement mechanisms, and the avatar concept provided emergency response systems. Yet actual evolutionary unfolding would depend on choices made by countless individual beings across multiple realms and ages. A period marked establishment of game rules, arrival of major participants, and foundation of principles for ensuing drama. But the real story was just beginning. The era when these forces would take specific forms to address particular challenges in the long descent through the ages toward Kali Yuga's final darkness. As the ages turned and righteousness began its slow decline through the great cycles of time, a profound crisis emerged. The balance between creation and destruction, order and chaos, had been carefully established, but maintaining it across vast eons required something unprecedented: the willingness of the Supreme Preserver to abandon his celestial throne and take physical form among the beings he protected. Vishnu, whose awareness permeated all existence, recognized that distant guidance from heavenly realms could not address every catastrophe that would arise as darkness gradually increased through the cosmic ages. When fundamental principles themselves came under attack, when the very possibility of growth and evolution faced extinction, only direct intervention could restore the balance necessary for life to continue. From this recognition emerged the Avatar principle: descent into form, not as cosmic punishment, but as cosmic mercy. Each incarnation would appear precisely when the balance between constructive and destructive forces reached a critical tipping point. These were not random appearances, but carefully timed responses to specific threats facing the continued development of consciousness and righteousness. 10 primary incarnations, the Dashavatara, would span millions of years and multiple stages of cosmic development, beginning with the most elemental forms of life and progressing through increasingly complex manifestations. They traced the very arc of evolution itself, from aquatic origins through terrestrial forms to human consciousness and beyond. When the great deluge rose to submerge the entire world and wash away all accumulated knowledge, Vishnu's first incarnation appeared as Matsya, a fish of colossal proportions. This was no ordinary flood, but a cosmic reset of such magnitude that it threatened to return creation to its primordial state. Waters rose beyond the highest mountains, swallowing continents and covering the earth in an endless ocean that stretched to every horizon. In this aquatic apocalypse, Matsya sought out Manu, the first man who had been warned of the coming catastrophe through prophetic dreams. Following divine instructions, Manu had constructed a massive vessel and gathered samples of all life forms, along with sacred texts containing the accumulated wisdom of ages. As conventional navigation became impossible, Matsya attached the ark to his horn and guided it through chaotic seas for 7 days and nights, protecting his precious cargo until the waters finally receded and dry land emerged once more. Another crisis, requiring a completely different solution, brought forth the second incarnation. The churning of the ocean, that great cooperative enterprise between devas and asuras, had reached a critical juncture when Mount Mandara began sinking into the ocean's depths under its own enormous weight. Without stable foundation, the entire project would collapse, leaving the life-giving Amrita forever beyond reach. Kurma, the tortoise incarnation, materialized beneath the sinking mountain, his vast shell providing an unshakable foundation for the cosmic operation. This was incarnation as infrastructure, Vishnu literally becoming the stable base upon which cooperation could continue. His shell, harder than diamond yet perfectly balanced, allowed the churning to resume with even greater intensity, eventually producing the treasures that would sustain the gods through countless ages. A threat to existence's very foundations brought forth the third incarnation. Hiranyaksha, a demon of immense power, had dragged the earth itself into the cosmic waters, intending to dissolve solid matter back into its primordial liquid state. This was not mere territorial conquest, but an assault on the principle of stable form itself, an attempt to prevent consciousness from having any solid ground upon which to develop. Varaha, the boar incarnation, plunged into the cosmic waters in pursuit of the demon and the kidnapped earth. His form was chosen with perfect appropriateness. Boars are natural diggers and swimmers, capable of rooting through the densest mud to find what lies hidden beneath. The battle between Varaha and Hiranyaksha raged through the depths of creation, their conflict sending shockwaves through every realm of existence. When Varaha finally defeated the demon and lifted the earth from the waters on his massive tusks, solid ground was restored for all life to flourish once again. Tyranny that combined political oppression with religious persecution demanded the fourth incarnation. Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha's brother, had gained near omnipotence through severe austerities, then used his accumulated power to establish a reign of terror that sought to eliminate all worship of Vishnu. His tyranny was particularly twisted because it targeted his own son, Prahlada, whose natural devotion to Vishnu drove the demon king to homicidal rage. Hiranyakashipu's power seemed absolute. He could not be killed by man or beast during day or night, inside or outside, by weapon or hand. These boons, gained through spiritual practice but corrupted by ego, made him effectively invincible by conventional means. His palace became a fortress of atheism, where the very mention of divine names brought torture and death. Narasimha, the man-lion incarnation, manifested at the precise moment when conventional solutions had been exhausted. Appearing at twilight, neither day nor night, on the threshold of the palace, neither inside nor outside, this form that was neither fully man nor beast seized the tyrant and tore him apart with claws, neither weapon nor hand. The divine fury of Narasimha was so intense that it threatened to consume the universe itself, requiring the innocent devotion of young Prahlada to calm the avatar's protective rage. A different type of conflict, not external conquest, but internal corruption, required the fifth incarnation. King Bali, despite his many admirable qualities, had achieved dominion over all three worlds through a combination of spiritual merit and military conquest. His rule was just and generous, bringing prosperity wherever he governed. Yet this very success had disrupted the cosmic balance by concentrating too much power in any single being's hands. Vamana, the dwarf Brahmin, appeared at one of Bali's grand sacrificial ceremonies, approaching the generous king with a simple request for land. merely 3 paces worth, the amount a small Brahmin might need for his sacrificial fire. Bali, known for his charity and eager to gain merit by supporting a holy man, immediately granted the modest request, despite warnings from his spiritual advisor that this was no ordinary petitioner. When Bali poured water on Vamana's hands to formalize the gift, the dwarf began expanding to cosmic proportions. With his first step, he covered the entire earth. With his second, he encompassed all the heavens. When he prepared for the third step, Bali realized he had encountered the Supreme Lord himself and offered his own head for the final pace, recognizing that true greatness lies not in holding power, but in surrendering it gracefully when cosmic balance requires. Corruption within the warrior class itself brought forth the 6th incarnation. The Kshatriyas, meant to protect society and uphold Dharma through righteous governance, had instead become parasitic oppressors, exploiting their subjects and ignoring their duties. Their military power, originally intended to serve righteousness, had been turned against the very principles they were sworn to protect. Parashurama, the Brahmin warrior wielding his father's axe, began a campaign of purification that spanned generations. 21 times he cleared the earth of corrupt warriors, each campaign targeting not merely individuals, but the systemic corruption that had infected the entire ruling class. His relentless pursuit of justice was driven not by bloodlust, but by recognition that sometimes complete destruction of corrupted systems is necessary before regeneration can begin. After completing his mission of purification, Parashurama retired to meditation, demonstrating that even necessary violence must be laid aside once its purpose is fulfilled. His example established that spiritual authority must sometimes take up weapons when temporal authority fails in its duties. But such intervention should always serve transcendent purposes rather than personal ambition. During the Treta Yuga, the 7th incarnation appeared as Rama, Prince of Ayodhya, whose life became the perfect example of righteous living within human limitations. Unlike previous incarnations that manifested superhuman powers openly, Rama chose to experience the full range of human challenges while maintaining unwavering commitment to Dharma. His incarnation was not for cosmic rescue, but for demonstration, showing how divine principles could be lived within ordinary human circumstances. The Dvapara Yuga would witness the 8th incarnation as Krishna, perhaps the most complex and complete avatar. His life encompassed every aspect of human experience while maintaining divine consciousness throughout. As a child, he displayed supernatural powers while engaging in innocent play. As a youth, he demonstrated divine love through his relationships with the residents of Vrindavan. As an adult, he served as charioteer, diplomat, and spiritual teacher during the Great War that marked the transition between cosmic ages. In later tales, the 9th incarnation took form as Buddha, a spiritual teacher whose profound wisdom spread far beyond his birthplace, touching hearts across distant lands and forever changing the world. This inclusion in the Avatar series reflected recognition that genuine spiritual innovation, even when it challenges existing religious forms, serves the deeper purpose of consciousness evolution. Buddha's emphasis on liberation from suffering provided essential teachings for humanity's continued spiritual development. Kalki, the 10th and final incarnation, waits in the future, a fierce warrior destined to emerge at the end of Kali Yuga, purging the world of deep-rooted darkness and restoring the dharmic order once more. This promised avatar serves as both warning and hope, demonstrating that divine intervention will ultimately ensure that darkness never completely overwhelms light, no matter how dire circumstances become. Taken together, the Dashavatara revealed a profound pattern spanning cosmic time itself. The progression from aquatic to terrestrial to human to divine forms mirrored the evolution of consciousness, while the specific challenges addressed by each incarnation reflected the particular needs of different cosmic ages. Some avatars rescued from external threats, others purified internal corruption, still others demonstrated ideal principles in action. The evolutionary symbolism embedded in this sequence would later inspire scientific thinking about biological development, from fish through amphibian and mammalian forms to human consciousness and beyond. The avatar progression paralleled the actual evolutionary development traced by modern science. This was not mere coincidence, but recognition that consciousness and matter evolved together, each stage of physical development enabling new possibilities for awareness and understanding. More profoundly, the avatar principle established that divine consciousness actively participates in evolutionary development rather than remaining detached from it. Each incarnation represented direct intervention in consciousness evolution, providing exactly the guidance, protection, or demonstration needed to ensure continued progress, despite the obstacles arising in each age. Equally momentous were the philosophical ramifications. If divine consciousness could incarnate fully in physical form while maintaining its transcendent nature, this suggested that the apparent contradiction between spirit and matter was illusory. The avatars demonstrated that consciousness and form, infinite and finite, eternal and temporal, could coexist without mutual negation. As the cosmic drama continued its ancient rhythm, these 10 incarnations provided anchor points of hope and guidance across the vast expanse of time. They established patterns that would be recognized by later spiritual traditions worldwide. The principle of divine descent, the possibility of perfected human existence, the promise of ultimate restoration regardless of temporary darkness. Still, every avatar's unique form and purpose was carefully tailored to confront the distinct challenges of its time. This revealed divine intelligence operating with surgical precision rather than general solutions, recognizing that different problems require different approaches, and that consciousness evolution proceeds through carefully orchestrated stages rather than random interventions. The avatar principle thus became both comfort and challenge for future generations. Comfort in knowing that divine assistance will appear when truly needed. Challenge in recognizing that such assistance comes not to eliminate difficulties, but to provide the tools and examples necessary for consciousness to transcend its current limitations through its own effort and understanding. When the great crises came, as they inevitably would in the darkening ages ahead, these examples would serve as proof that no challenge is too great for divine love to meet, no corruption too deep for divine wisdom to heal, and no darkness too complete for divine light to illuminate. The avatars had established that evolution itself is guided by intelligence that will never abandon those who struggle toward truth, no matter how impossible their circumstances might appear. In the ancient kingdom of Ayodhya, during the Treta Yuga, when Dharma still flourished across the earth, there ruled a monarch whose very name had become synonymous with ideal governance. Dasharatha, descendant of the solar dynasty, had brought such prosperity and justice to his realm that his subjects lived without fear of crime, disease, or want. Markets overflowed with goods, fields yielded abundant harvests, and the kingdom's borders remained secure against all threats. Yet despite his many achievements and the love of his people, darkness clouded the ruler's otherwise perfect reign. He had no heir to continue his noble lineage. Years of prayers and sacrifices had yielded no result until the sage Rishyasringa suggested a powerful ritual designed specifically to grant sons to worthy rulers. For months, the royal court gathered proper materials, purified sacred grounds, and prepared for the ceremony with meticulous care. When the great fire blazed at the ritual's climax, something extraordinary occurred. From the flames emerged a luminous being, carrying a golden vessel filled with a substance that seemed to capture starlight itself. This celestial messenger presented the precious offering to Dasharatha, with instructions that it be shared among his queens, according to their worthiness and his affection for them. Dasharatha divided the miraculous substance among his 3 wives. Kausalya, his chief queen, received the largest portion. Kaikeyi, his beloved younger wife, who had once saved his life in battle, received the second share. Sumitra, gentle and self-effacing, received the remainder. Within months, all 3 queens showed signs of pregnancy, and the entire kingdom rejoiced in anticipation of the heirs who would secure the dynasty's future. When the children were born, their extraordinary nature became immediately apparent. The first son, born to Kausalya, possessed a radiance that seemed to illuminate everything around him. Even as an infant, his presence brought peace to troubled minds and joy to heavy hearts. The court astrologers declared that this child, named Rama, would become the greatest ruler in the dynasty's history. Bharata, Kaikeyi's son, displayed remarkable intelligence and an instinctive understanding of statecraft. Lakshmana and Shatrughna, Sumitra's twins, exhibited such devotion to their elder brothers that they seemed incomplete when separated from them. Lakshmana, in particular, formed an unbreakable bond with the eldest, following him everywhere and anticipating his every need. As the boys grew, their exceptional qualities became even more pronounced. Rama excelled in every art: archery, swordsmanship, horsemanship, and the study of sacred texts. Yet more remarkable than his physical and intellectual accomplishments was his character. Never was he seen to speak harshly to anyone. Never did he show preference for his own comfort over others' needs. Never did he claim credit for achievements that belonged to others. When the youths reached manhood, the sage Vishwamitra arrived at court with a request that would forever alter their destiny. This great rishi, whose spiritual accomplishments had elevated him from royal birth to Brahmin status through sheer force of austerity, sought the monarch's permission to take the 2 eldest sons to his hermitage. Demons had been disrupting his sacrificial rituals, and he needed warriors pure enough to enter sacred precincts, yet powerful enough to defeat supernatural enemies. Dasharatha's initial reluctance to part with his beloved children was overcome by recognition that a request from such an exalted sage could not be refused. Under Vishwamitra's tutelage, the brothers learned not merely military techniques, but the deeper forces underlying all effective action. They mastered weapons that could function across multiple dimensions and mantras that could summon or dismiss various natural powers. In the face of demonic assault on the sage's sacrifice, Rama's arrows pierced with unearthly precision, preserving the sacred rite and ridding the forest of evil. This successful defense brought an invitation that would prove pivotal to his destiny. Janaka of Mithila had announced a competition for his daughter's hand, but with an unprecedented condition. Only the man capable of lifting, stringing, and drawing Shiva's legendary bow would be worthy of her. This was no ordinary weapon, but the very bow that Shiva had wielded in his battles, an instrument of such power that merely approaching it required exceptional spiritual purity. Countless warriors and nobles had already attempted and failed to so much as budge the massive weapon, which required the combined strength of hundreds of men simply to transport it. Upon Vishwamitra's arrival at Janaka's court with the 2 young brothers, onlookers initially doubted them, seeing their youth as a barrier to success where seasoned warriors had fallen. But when Rama approached the bow, something extraordinary occurred. With casual ease, as if picking up a toy, he lifted the weapon, strung it, and drew it back. The bow, unable to withstand the power flowing through his hands, snapped in half with a sound like thunder that shook the palace foundations. The princess, watching from behind a silken screen, recognized in that moment that she was witnessing not merely a feat of strength, but something far more profound. When she emerged to place the victory garland around his neck, their eyes met with a recognition that transcended ordinary attraction. The marriage celebrations that followed united two of the most noble royal houses in the land, cementing alliances that would prove crucial in trials ahead. For several years after their return to Ayodhya, the royal family lived in perfect harmony. Rama's reputation for wisdom and compassion spread throughout the kingdom, making him beloved by subjects who eagerly anticipated the day he would assume the throne. Dasharatha, recognizing both his advancing age and his son's exceptional qualifications, began making preparations to formally crown him as heir apparent. However, these preparations triggered a crisis that had been planted years earlier through palace intrigue. Manthara, Kaikeyi's hunchbacked maid, had long harbored resentment toward the royal family, despite receiving generous treatment. When she learned of the impending coronation, she saw an opportunity to advance her own interests, while destroying what she perceived as threats to her position. Through carefully crafted arguments, Manthara convinced Kaikeyi that Rama's rule would inevitably marginalize Bharata and herself. The maid reminded her mistress of two boons that Dasharatha had promised years earlier when Kaikeyi had saved his life on the battlefield. These promises, given in gratitude and love, had never been claimed, but they remained valid according to sacred laws governing royal word. Under Manthara's poisonous influence, Kaikeyi's natural affection transformed into fear for her son's future. When Dasharatha came to share his joy about the planned coronation, he found his beloved wife dressed in mourning clothes, lying on the floor of her private chamber in apparent despair. Her demands, when finally disclosed, struck him like physical blows. She wanted Bharata crowned instead, and she wanted Rama banished to the forest for 14 years. Dasharatha's anguish at these demands cannot be adequately described. His love for his firstborn was so profound that the mere thought of separation brought physical pain. Yet his word as a monarch was sacred, bound by laws that transcended personal preference. For hours he pleaded with Kaikeyi to reconsider, offering her wealth, kingdoms, even his own life in place of the terrible boons she had chosen to claim. As soon as Rama became aware of the crisis, he responded without hesitation or doubt. Without hesitation or complaint, he accepted the banishment as an opportunity to honor his father's word and uphold the sacred nature of royal promises. His calm acceptance of circumstances that would have driven lesser men to rage or despair displayed a character that understood duty not as external constraint, but as the very expression of his essential nature. The princess's decision to accompany her husband into wilderness established a legendary example of wifely devotion. Her arguments for joining him revealed sophisticated understanding that a wife's duty was not merely to share her husband's prosperity, but to participate fully in his life's purpose, whether it led to palace or forest. Her gentle but firm refusal to remain in comfort while he faced hardship expressed true love through shared sacrifice, rather than mere sentiment. Lakshmana's immediate decision to join the banishment surprised no one who understood the depth of his devotion to his brother. His willingness to abandon his own wife and comfort to serve in the wilderness exemplified the bonds that transcend ordinary family obligation. Urmila's brave acceptance of separation from her husband demonstrated that duty extends to supporting others' sacred obligations, even when it requires personal sacrifice. As the three left Ayodhya, the entire population sought to follow, unwilling to stay in a kingdom that had lost its most cherished heir. Only Rama's direct command, given with tears in his eyes, convinced the people to return and support Bharata's eventual rule. This scene revealed true leadership, not domination imposed through force, but devotion freely given in response to genuine love and service. Bharata's reaction upon returning from his uncle's kingdom to find his brother banished and his father dead from grief provided another powerful example of noble behavior. Rather than accepting the throne that had been won for him through his mother's manipulations, he immediately set out for the forest to bring Rama back. His refusal to benefit from actions he had not authorized illustrated that individual responsibility cannot be escaped through ignorance or good intentions. When Bharata found his brother in the forest, their meeting expressed the highest possibilities of family relationships. Bharata's sincere repentance for his mother's actions was met with complete forgiveness and understanding. Yet Rama's gentle but firm refusal to return before completing his term illustrated that personal relationships, however loving, could not override sacred obligations once undertaken. Bharata's solution to this dilemma revealed remarkable wisdom and devotion. He would return to Ayodhya and rule as regent, but he would place Rama's sandals on the throne as a symbol that all authority ultimately belonged to the rightful heir. For 14 years, he would live as an ascetic outside the capital, governing the kingdom while maintaining the austerities appropriate to someone who serves another's purposes rather than his own. Life in the forest for the three exiles became an extended lesson in finding fulfillment through simplicity and service. Far from palace luxuries, they discovered that happiness arose not from external circumstances, but from the quality of relationships and clarity of purpose that guided their actions. Their interactions with forest sages disclosed that true wealth lay in wisdom, peace, and the opportunity to live according to higher understanding. Various trials during their wilderness years tested and refined their characters. When the demoness Surpanaka approached Rama with inappropriate desires, his tactful rejection, followed by her assault on his wife, brought challenges that arise when noble behavior encounters those who recognize no moral constraints. Lakshmana's swift protection of his sister-in-law's honor, though involving violence against a female, illustrated that honorable action sometimes requires hard choices between competing values. Surpanaka's humiliation and subsequent complaint to her brother set in motion events that would transform a family banishment into an epic conflict between Dharma and Adharma. Her brother, the 10-headed ruler of Lanka, possessed learning, power, and accomplishments that should have made him a force for good in the world. Yet his refusal to control his desires and his belief that might made right ultimately corrupted all his positive qualities. This demon ruler's decision to abduct the princess was motivated not merely by lust, but by wounded pride and the desire to prove that no one could resist his will. His elaborate deception, using the demon Maricha, disguised as a golden deer to lure Rama away from their hermitage, displayed both his intelligence and his willingness to use any means to achieve his goals. When the plan succeeded, and he carried off the helpless woman in his aerial chariot, it represented cleverness triumphing over virtue in a way that characterized the darker phases of each cosmic cycle. Jatayu, the aged eagle who attempted to rescue the captive, provided a powerful example of noble action that transcends species boundaries. Though mortally wounded in his failed attempt to save her, his willingness to sacrifice his life for what was right illustrated that moral duty extends to all conscious beings, capable of recognizing higher values. his final service, providing crucial information about the direction and identity of the captor before dying, illustrated that even apparent defeat can serve noble purposes. Rama's anguish upon discovering his wife's abduction revealed his human nature, while his determined search for her expressed his commitment to sacred relationships. His alliance with Sugriva, the exiled monkey ruler, established that worthy causes naturally attract support from unexpected sources. By helping Sugriva regain his throne from his brother Vali, Rama gained not merely military assistance, but the devoted service of beings whose loyalty would prove unshakable. Hanuman's emergence as Rama's greatest devotee during this period revealed the transformative power of selfless service. This mighty being, capable of leaping across oceans and wielding supernatural strength, found his true purpose not in displaying powers for personal glory, but in serving someone who embodied perfect virtue. His journey to Lanka to locate the captive became a legendary example of mission accomplishment through courage, intelligence, and unwavering dedication. Their dialogue in the demon ruler's garden exposed the spiritual essence hidden beneath the surface of the political clash. Her refusal to escape with Hanuman, though she possessed the power to do so, expressed her understanding that virtuous victory required proper means as well as just goals. Her insistence that her husband himself must rescue her upheld the idea that virtue must triumph through its own strength rather than through shortcuts that might compromise its purity. Preparation for war between Rama's forces and the demon's mighty army required careful attention to honorable rules of warfare. Even when fighting against those who had violated every standard of decent behavior, Rama insisted on following traditional codes of combat. His refusal to take unfair advantage, even against an enemy who recognized no such constraints, illustrated that virtuous action derives its power precisely from its adherence to universal standards regardless of others' behavior. Vibhishana's decision to abandon his brother and seek refuge with Rama provided another powerful example of moral choice. Despite ties of blood and loyalty built over centuries, this wise demon recognized that supporting evil, even from family obligation, would ultimately harm both himself and those he sought to protect. His acceptance by Rama, despite strong objections from some allies, indicated that worthy movements must remain open to sincere converts, regardless of their previous associations. When battle finally came, it revealed virtue's ultimate superiority over mere power and cleverness. Though the demon's forces possessed supernatural weapons and numerical superiority, they could not withstand the moral force that animated Rama's army. The demon ruler's greatest warriors fell not merely to superior tactics, but to the inevitable consequence of fighting against virtue itself. His death, when it came, was mourned as a sorrowful waste, rather than a conquest over darkness. His final moments revealed recognition of his opponent's true nature and regret for choices that had led to his destruction. This compassionate portrayal illustrated that even enemies deserve understanding, and that virtuous victory should be tempered with sorrow for the suffering that wrong choices inevitably bring. The princess's trial by fire, demanded despite certain knowledge of her purity, represented a complex episode in the entire epic. The insistence on public proof of her chastity, though painful to both of them, illustrated that noble leadership sometimes requires leaders to place duty to ideals above personal feelings. Her willing acceptance of the trial and the fire's refusal to harm her provided confirmation of her purity, while establishing that truth ultimately reveals itself regardless of human skepticism. Return to Ayodhya after 14 years of wilderness marked the restoration of proper order. But it also disclosed that noble leadership involves ongoing challenges rather than permanent solutions. Rama's coronation brought joy to his subjects and prosperity to the kingdom, yet it also initiated new responsibilities that would test his commitment to virtue in different ways. Years later, when gossip about his wife's time in the demon's captivity began circulating among the people, the monarch faced perhaps his most difficult decision. His choice to send her into seclusion, though she was pregnant with his children, illustrated that noble leadership sometimes requires leaders to sacrifice personal happiness for their subjects' confidence in their moral authority. This painful decision indicated that virtue does not promise ease or conventional happiness, but rather the deeper satisfaction that comes from consistent adherence to universal ideals. Through dignified acceptance of this second parting and a life of austerity in Valmiki's hermitage, the princess's exceptional character was fully revealed. Her refusal to return when her husband later sought reconciliation indicated that dignity sometimes requires maintaining boundaries, even with those we love most. Her eventual return to Mother Earth, from whom she had originally emerged, symbolized the ultimate reunion of individual existence with universal forces. Rama's own departure from earthly life, walking into the river Sarayu and resuming his form as Vishnu, completed the expression of virtuous living within human limitations. His entire life had illustrated that it was possible to maintain perfect adherence to virtue while experiencing the full range of human joys and sorrows. His example established standards that would guide rulers and common people alike for thousands of years. The epic thus became more than entertainment or even religious instruction. It provided a complete guide to virtuous living that addressed every aspect of human relationships and social responsibility, from family dynamics to governance, from personal ethics to military conduct, from the rights of subjects to the duties of rulers. This story offered examples that could guide decision-making in virtually any circumstance. Most profoundly, the tale established that virtuous action produces its own reward through transformation of character and the peace of mind that comes from living according to universal ideals. External circumstances might bring joy or sorrow, success or failure, but those who maintain noble orientation experience an underlying fulfillment that transcends temporary conditions. As the Treta Yuga drew toward its close, this example provided a foundation of virtue that would sustain civilization through the more challenging ages ahead. The illustration that virtue could be lived perfectly within human limitations offered hope that individual effort, guided by proper understanding, could resist the decline that seemed inevitable as cosmic cycles progressed toward darker phases. In the kingdom of Mathura, as the Dvapara Yuga reached its height, there ruled a tyrant whose cruelty had turned a once prosperous realm into a place of terror and despair. Kamsa, driven by prophecies that his sister's 8th infant would destroy him, had already murdered 6 babies in his desperate attempt to escape destiny. When Devaki gave birth to her 7th son, supernatural forces intervened to save the baby, who was secretly transported to the village of Gokula. On a stormy night, when the very elements seemed to conspire against tyranny, Vasudeva carried his newborn through the raging Yamuna River, which parted to allow their passage. The infant was placed in the care of Yashoda and Nanda, simple cowherd folk whose love would nurture this dark-skinned boy through a childhood that would become the stuff of legend. From his earliest days, the baby displayed miraculous powers wrapped in innocent play. As an infant, he killed the demoness Putana, who came to poison him with her toxic breast milk, sucking not only the poison, but her very life force until she revealed her true monstrous form in death. Yet moments later, he was simply a beautiful baby again, sleeping peacefully in his foster mother's arms. Yashoda often found herself perplexed by her extraordinary foster son, When she tried to tie him up for mischief, the rope always fell short by just 2 finger widths, no matter how much she added. When she opened his mouth to see if he had eaten dirt, she glimpsed the entire universe within, planets, stars, and galaxies swirling in infinite space, before he closed his mouth and became once again just her playful son. The boy's reputation as a butter thief became legendary throughout Vrindavan. With his band of young friends, he would devise elaborate schemes to reach the pots of freshly churned butter that mothers hung from their ceilings. His technique was flawless. Another youth would bend down, a second would climb on his shoulders, and the little thief would distribute the stolen treasure among his companions, always ensuring that the poorest children received their share. When the cowherd women complained to Yashoda about her son's exploits, she could never quite bring herself to be truly angry. There was something about the boy's mischievous grin and innocent eyes that made punishment impossible. The women themselves often found that they looked forward to his raids, secretly enjoying the drama and excitement he brought to their daily routines. As the youth grew older, his adventures became more spectacular. When the serpent Kaliya had poisoned the Yamuna with his venomous presence, making the water deadly to all who touched it, the young cowherd danced upon the many hooded cobras' heads, until the great snake submitted and agreed to leave the river forever. The dance was so beautiful that even the serpent's wives begged him to continue, their hearts filled with devotion rather than fear. Few acts showcased the boy's supernatural nature as vividly as the raising of Mount Govardhan. When Indra, angered by the villagers' decision to worship their young protector, instead of offering their annual sacrifice to the storm god, sent torrential rains to flood the entire region, 7-year-old Gopal simply lifted the entire mountain on his little finger like an umbrella. For 7 days and nights, he held it aloft while all the people and animals of Vrindavan sheltered beneath it, never showing the slightest strain or fatigue. But it was the Ras Leela, the circular dance of love, that would become the most celebrated aspect of his youth. On moonlit nights, when the silver light transformed the forests of Vrindavan into an enchanted realm, the young cowherd would play his flute with such haunting beauty that the very trees would lean in to listen. The melody would call to the hearts of the village girls, who would abandon their household duties to dance with the enchanting musician in the sacred groves. Each maiden who came to dance felt that the cowherd was dancing with her alone. Such was the mystery of his nature. Though there were many participants, each experienced the dance as an intimate communion with the beloved. The dance represented the soul's eternal relationship with the Supreme, the longing, the surrender, the joy of union. Yet it was also simply beautiful young people celebrating life under the stars, their feet keeping rhythm with the music of creation itself. Among all the village girls, Radha held a special place in the cowherd's heart. Their love became the supreme example of transcendent romance, though it was a love that went beyond physical union to represent the eternal dance between the individual soul and supreme awareness. Their separation, when it came, would be as significant as their union, teaching that ultimate love sometimes requires sacrifice of personal happiness for universal duty. As the youth approached manhood, the peaceful idyll of Vrindavan began to darken with the intrusion of the larger world's conflicts. Kamsa, learning of his survival, sent increasingly powerful demons to destroy the boy. Each assault was met with playful ease. Trinavata, the whirlwind demon, was defeated when the youth became so heavy that the demon fell from the sky. Bakasura, the crane demon, was killed when the boy split his beak apart. Agasura, the serpent demon who could swallow entire armies, choked on the young hero who expanded within his throat. Finally, the time came for the cowherd to fulfill the prophecy that had driven Kamsa to such desperate measures. Invited to Mathura for what was supposedly a friendly wrestling competition, the youth and his brother Balarama entered the city to find it prepared for their destruction. The wrestling match was rigged with professional fighters who had killed dozens of challengers, while Kamsa waited with armed guards ready to finish whatever the wrestlers left undone. The competition became a battle between good and evil. The brothers, though still technically adolescents, fought with such skill and power that they seemed to be dancing rather than wrestling. The champion fighters fell like grain before the scythe, their strength no match for opponents who drew their power from righteousness itself. When the last wrestler lay defeated, the dark-skinned youth leaped directly onto the royal platform and seized Kamsa himself. Years of oppression were ended abruptly by the tyrant's swift and final death. But it also marked the end of the cowherd's carefree childhood and the beginning of his role as a political and spiritual leader. The innocent boy who had stolen butter and danced with village girls was revealed to be a force capable of reshaping the destiny of kingdoms. Restoring his grandfather Ugrasena to the throne of Mathura, the new leader established himself as a power broker in the increasingly complex political landscape of the age. Yet his greatest challenges lay not in defeating obvious enemies, but in navigating the subtle corruptions that were beginning to infect even noble families as the Dvapara Yuga progressed toward its darker conclusion. Among all, the royal family of Hastinapura embodied the deepest tragedy of this decline. King Pandu had died young, leaving his 5 sons, the Pandavas, to be raised alongside their 100 cousins, the Kauravas, by their uncle Dhritarashtra. Though all were princes of the same lineage, fundamental differences in character would eventually tear the family apart and plunge the entire subcontinent into conflict. Yudhishthira, the eldest brother, embodied righteousness to such a degree that he literally could not speak a lie. Bhima possessed supernatural strength that made him nearly invincible in combat. The third brother was perhaps the greatest archer who had ever lived, capable of shooting by sound alone and hitting targets that others could not even see. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, were masters of swordsmanship and animal law, respectively. Together, they represented the highest possibilities of noble character and martial skill. The Kauravas, led by the ambitious eldest prince, possessed equal training in weapons and statecraft, but lacked the moral foundation that guided their cousins. This prince's jealousy of his cousin's popularity and skill gradually poisoned his relationships with them, while his uncle Shakuni fed his resentments with calculated advice designed to destroy the family unity that might have prevented tragedy. Trouble began when the 5 brothers were summoned to Hastinapura for a game of dice that was supposed to be friendly. Yudhishthira, bound by his code of honor to accept any legitimate challenge, agreed to play despite his brother's misgivings. The game was rigged from the beginning. Shakuni, a master of dice manipulation, would actually play while the ambitious prince made the challenges. What followed was painful beyond description. Yudhishthira, trapped by his own honesty and honor, lost everything in stages. First his wealth, then his kingdom, then his brothers, then himself, and finally his wife, Draupadi. When the eldest Kaurava ordered that the Pandava queen be dragged into the assembly hall and disrobed before the entire court, the moral fabric of civilization began to tear apart. Absent at the time of humiliation, the cowherd prince's aid arrived through otherworldly forces. As the Kaurava brother pulled at Draupadi's sari, the cloth multiplied endlessly, allowing her to maintain her dignity while her tormentor exhausted himself in futile effort. This miracle provided temporary salvation, but it also served notice that higher forces were taking an active interest in the justice or injustice of human deeds. Following the game, the 5 brothers faced 13 years of exile, 12 spent in the forest and 1 year in concealment, with the stipulation that if they were uncovered in that final year, they must begin the exile anew. This punishment, though nominally agreed to as part of the dice game, represented a fundamental violation of justice that would eventually demand correction. During their forest exile, the brothers received visits from their ally that helped prepare them for the trials ahead. He provided practical advice about survival and strategy, but more importantly, he began the spiritual education that would culminate in the Bhagavad Gita. Through stories and discussions, he taught them to see their personal sufferings as part of a larger pattern that required their participation in its resolution. When Draupadi questioned whether their adherence to righteousness was worth the suffering it brought, their teacher explained that Dharma was not a bargain with the universe that guaranteed happiness in return for good behavior. Rather, it was the very fabric of reality that, when followed, aligned individual conduct with universal purpose. Their current suffering was not punishment for past misdeeds, but preparation for the great work they would be called upon to perform. The 13th year of exile, spent in disguise at the court of King Virata, tested the brothers in different ways. Yudhishthira worked as a dice player, Bhima as a cook, the great archer disguised himself as a eunuch dance teacher, while the twins tended horses and cattle. Draupadi served as the queen's maid, her beauty carefully hidden to avoid recognition. Only their disciplined adherence to their assumed roles allowed them to complete this final trial successfully. As the exile period ended and the brothers requested the return of their kingdom, the Kaurava refusal made conflict inevitable. The eldest Kaurava's famous declaration that he would not give them enough land to drive a needle into crystallize the moral positions that would define the coming struggle. On the side stood those who demanded justice and the restoration of rightful rule. On the other stood those who preferred immediate advantage to moral obligation. The cowherd prince's role as peace negotiator revealed his political wisdom and his understanding of necessity. Though he knew that conflict was inevitable, indeed necessary for the purification of the age, he made genuine efforts to prevent it. His final embassy to Hastinapura included an offer that was more generous than justice required. The brothers would accept just 5 villages instead of their entire kingdom. The Kaurava rejection of even this minimal offer removed any doubt about where moral responsibility lay. During the negotiations, the mediators' display of their universal form revealed a fearsome glimpse of the power behind the unfolding events. When the eldest Kaurava foolishly attempted to arrest the ambassador in the assembly hall, the visitor revealed his universal form, containing all gods, all worlds, all times within himself. The vision was so overwhelming that most observers fell unconscious, while those who remained awake begged him to resume his human appearance. Both sides sought their allies' support for the coming struggle, leading to a significant choice. When the Kaurava prince and the great archer both arrived to request his aid, the teacher offered a choice. Either side could have his vast armies, or they could have him personally as a non-combatant advisor. The Kaurava, thinking strategically, chose the armies. The archer, guided by love and intuition, chose the teacher personally. This choice would prove decisive, not because of any military advantage, but because it placed the greatest warrior in direct contact with wisdom during the struggle's most crucial moments. As the teacher served as the archer's charioteer, He would provide not just tactical advice, but spiritual guidance that would transform both the warrior and everyone who would later study their conversations. Kurukshetra's epic battle commenced as the greatest armies ever assembled took their places. Warriors came from every kingdom, bringing weapons and techniques that represented the pinnacle of military science. Elephants, horses, chariots, and foot soldiers arranged themselves in formations that could be seen from the mountains to the sea. Yet despite the martial grandeur, this was fundamentally a conflict between two ways of understanding life itself. On the morning of the first battle, as the two armies faced each other across the field, the archer requested that his charioteer drive their vehicle between the opposing forces so he could observe his enemies before fighting began. What he saw there paralyzed him with grief and confusion. Arranged against him were not just enemies, but teachers who had instructed him, relatives who had played with him as a youth, and friends whose company he had enjoyed in peaceful times. Even this greatest of warriors was overwhelmed by the moral complexity of the situation. How could killing these men be justified, even in a righteous cause? What victory could be worth the destruction of the social bonds that held civilization together? Would it not be better to renounce the fight entirely and accept whatever consequences followed from such renunciation? His bow slipping from nerveless hands and sinking into his chariot in despair, the archer's collapse paved the way for history's most vital spiritual conversation. His teacher's response to his friend's crisis became the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, which would guide seekers for thousands of years in understanding how to act righteously in a morally complex world. At its core, the lesson began by asking, what truly defines life and death? The charioteer explained that the eternal soul within each being is never actually born and never dies, but simply moves from one body to another, like a person changing clothes. Therefore, the warrior's grief for those who might die in battle was based on illusion. He was mourning something that was actually impossible. But this was only the beginning of a much deeper teaching about the nature of conduct itself. The teacher introduced 3 paths of yoga, 3 ways of connecting individual effort with universal purpose. Karma yoga, the path of selfless service, involved performing duty without attachment to results. Bhakti yoga, the path of devotion, involved offering all deeds as worship to the Supreme. Jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, involved understanding the ultimate unity behind all apparent multiplicity. Central to the lesson was Dharma, understood not as strict laws, but as the guiding principle that sustains order. Each person has a svadharma, a natural duty based on their circumstances, abilities, and stage of life. For a warrior like the archer, fighting to restore justice was not just permitted, but required. To abandon this duty out of misplaced sentiment would actually violate Dharma and harm the universal order. Yet the manner of conduct was as important as the deed itself. The teacher explained Nishkama Karma, service without attachment to results. Each person should perform duty perfectly, but surrender the fruits of effort to the supreme will. This approach freed the actor from both the pride that comes with success and the despair that follows failure, while ensuring that behavior served universal rather than merely personal purposes. It was through the discourse that the charioteer's true essence, as supreme awareness manifesting in human shape, was revealed. When the archer requested to see this universal form directly, his teacher granted him transcendent sight to perceive the form that contained all beings, all times, and all possibilities within itself. The vision was so overwhelming that the warrior begged to see his familiar human form again, but the experience left him with unshakable faith in his charioteer's true nature. With his doubts resolved, and his purpose clarified. The archer took up his bow, and the great struggle began. For 18 days, the armies clashed with an intensity that shook the earth. Heroes fell on both sides, their deaths marked by supernatural portents that indicated the significance of their sacrifice. The battle was fought according to ancient codes of honor, but as casualties mounted and victory remained elusive, even these noble standards began to erode. Through the struggle, the charioteer's part revealed how complex supreme guidance can be in a world of moral uncertainty. Though technically non-combatant, he provided strategic advice that sometimes involved bending the rules of warfare, when strict adherence to them would allow greater injustices to triumph. His interventions were always designed to support Dharma, but they required a deeper understanding of universal law than surface-level rule-following could provide. Bhishma's death, the grand patriarch of both families, marked the first major turning point. This ancient warrior, bound by vows of loyalty to the throne regardless of who occupied it, had fought for the Kauravas despite his personal affection for their cousins. Only when he chose to lay down his weapons could the great archer finally strike him down. And even then, the old warrior was granted the boon of choosing his time of death. Drona, the weapons teacher of both sides, presented an even more complex moral challenge. His teaching skills had made the struggle possible by training both armies, yet his loyalty to the royal family required him to fight against his own favorite students. His death came through a stratagem that involved a deliberate ambiguity. When told that his son was dead, though it was actually an elephant named Ashwathama, his grief made him vulnerable to attack. Perhaps no moment in the battle was more tragic than Karna's demise. This great warrior, unknown to most as the eldest brother among the five, had been abandoned at birth and raised by a charioteer family. His natural nobility and martial skill had earned him great fame, but his low birth had subjected him to constant humiliation from the very brothers he should have led. His loyalty to the eldest Kaurava, who had treated him with respect when others showed only disdain, exemplified the complex ways that Dharma and Adharma could become entangled in real situations. When the ambitious prince himself fell, struck down by Bhima in single combat, the struggle effectively ended. Yet the victory brought little joy to the survivors. Nearly everyone they had known and loved lay dead on the battlefield, and the kingdom they had fought to reclaim felt like a graveyard of memories. The cost of establishing righteousness had been almost everything they held dear in life. The battle's aftermath revealed the psychological and spiritual toll of even necessary violence. Yudhishthira, despite being on the winning side, was consumed with guilt over the carnage he had helped cause. Only through his teachers' continued guidance and the understanding that their deeds had served purposes larger than personal preference could the brothers find peace with what they had done. In his last years, the cowherd prince proved that even divine incarnations are bound by the unstoppable forces of time and transformation. The Yadava clan, his own family, fell to internal strife that paralleled the larger conflicts of the age. When a curse caused them to destroy each other in a drunken brawl, it fulfilled the requirement that even the supreme must experience the full range of human suffering and loss. His death came through the deed of a hunter who mistook him for a deer and shot him with an arrow. As he lay dying, the wounded teacher blessed his inadvertent killer and explained that this too was part of the universal plan. His departure from the world marked the beginning of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness that would test humanity's ability to maintain Dharma without the constant guidance of such incarnations. Still, his legacy lived on, not just in the spiritual teachings he had given, but in the example of supreme love he had embodied. From his childhood pranks to his mature political wisdom, from his romantic play to his sacrificial service, he had demonstrated that highest awareness could fully inhabit human form without losing either its transcendent nature or its intimate accessibility. The cowherd boy who had stolen butter and danced with village girls had become the teacher whose wisdom would guide humanity through its darkest age. His life proved that the highest spiritual realizations were compatible with full engagement in worldly responsibilities, and that supreme love could express itself through every aspect of human experience. As the Dvapara Yuga gave way to Kali Yuga, and the world prepared for its descent into spiritual darkness, his teachings and example provided an anchor of hope. No matter how difficult circumstances might become, his life demonstrated that supreme awareness remained available to those who sought it with sincere hearts and were willing to surrender their personal agendas to universal purpose. With the great teacher's departure from the world, darkness began its inexorable advance across the earth. The golden threads that had woven righteousness into the fabric of civilization started unraveling, strand by strand, as humanity entered Kali Yuga, the era of iron, discord, and blindness to higher truth. Where once Dharma had flourished like grain in fertile soil, now deception took root and spread like weeds, choking out everything noble and pure. The transformation was not sudden, but gradual, like the slow dimming of twilight into night. In the first centuries after the great battle of Kurukshetra, learned men still gathered to study texts, and rulers still attempted to govern according to traditional law. Yet with each passing generation, the light grew dimmer. Children no longer listened to their elders with the same reverence. Students questioned their teachers not from wisdom, but from arrogance, and monarchs began to see power as an end in itself, rather than a trust. Such environment reflected this moral decay. Seasons became unpredictable, with rains failing when crops needed water most, and floods destroying harvests ready for gathering. Animals grew more aggressive, turning against humans who had once lived in harmony with them. Even the earth itself seemed to withdraw its bounty, requiring ever greater effort to produce ever smaller yields. 7 immortal beings, however, remained as witnesses to these changes and guardians of wisdom. Ashwatthama, the warrior's son, cursed to wander the earth with an unhealable wound, carried the burden of remembering the great battle's lessons about the cost of uncontrolled anger. Bali, the generous demon king who had been humbled by Vamana, ruled the netherworld with patience, learned through surrender to higher will. In hidden forests and remote mountains, the sage Vyasa continued composing verses that would preserve essential teachings for future generations. Hanuman, the devoted monkey warrior, maintained his vigil in consecrated places, appearing to sincere seekers who called upon his master's name with genuine faith. Vibhishana governed Lanka with the righteousness that had led him to abandon his brother's cause for Dharma's sake. Kripa, the gentle teacher who had survived the great battle through his refusal to fight unnecessarily, established schools in remote locations where traditional understanding could be maintained despite the growing darkness. And somewhere in the wilderness, Parashurama, the Brahmin warrior, practiced his austerities while watching for signs that his axe might once again be needed to cleanse the earth of corruption. These 7 served as bridges between the fading golden era and the dark times ahead, their immortal presence ensuring that complete wisdom would never be entirely lost from the world. Yet their influence was limited by the era's character. They could preserve and occasionally guide, but they could not prevent the general decline that was written into time's very structure. As centuries passed, the degradation accelerated. Brahmins began selling their learning like merchants hawking goods in the marketplace. forgetting that wisdom was meant to be shared freely with worthy students. Rulers abandoned their duty to protect the innocent, instead becoming predators who exploited their subjects' weakness. Merchants cheated customers without shame, while laborers refused to work unless paid in advance. Marriage became a commercial transaction rather than a blessed bond. Parents sold their daughters to the highest bidder, while children abandoned elderly parents rather than honor their debt to those who had raised them. The ashrams, where sages had once taught eager students in forest groves, were abandoned as humanity lost interest in anything that did not promise immediate material gain. Religious practice degenerated into empty ritual, performed by priests who no longer understood the meanings behind ceremonies. Temples became centers of political intrigue rather than refuge. Festivals turned into occasions for drinking and debauchery rather than community celebration and renewal of commitment to higher ideals. Learning itself became fragmented and corrupted. Where once a single teacher might have mastered multiple sciences, now specialists understood only narrow fields, while losing sight of the larger patterns that connected all understanding. Books that had preserved wisdom were neglected, their palm leaves crumbling to dust as fewer individuals could read the old scripts or understand the concepts they contained. Natural human lifespan began decreasing as society lost the vitality that came from living in harmony with universal law. Where ancestors had lived for hundreds or even thousands of years, their descendants aged rapidly and died young, their shortened lives filled with anxiety and disease. Even physical stature diminished, as if the very substance of humanity was being diluted with each generation. Yet the darkness was not uniform or complete. Like stars that shine brightest against the blackest night, exceptional individuals continued to appear throughout Kali Yuga's long duration. These lights maintained traditions of devotion, study, and service that kept wisdom alive in small communities of sincere seekers. Some established communities in remote locations where traditional ways could be preserved. Others traveled from place to place, teaching whoever would listen and adapting truths to the understanding of each new generation. Still others worked quietly within corrupt institutions, maintaining islands of integrity that could serve as seeds for future renewal. Though affected by the era's general degradation, the common folk retained an instinctive hunger for something higher than the materialism that dominated public life. This yearning expressed itself in new forms of devotion that emphasized emotional connection with the divine rather than complex philosophical understanding or elaborate ritual observance. Bhakti, the path of love and surrender, became the most accessible practice for an era when humanity lacked the time, training, or temperament for more demanding disciplines. Simple chanting of divine names could transform hearts that philosophy might leave untouched. Stories of heroes and teachers continued to inspire, even when their historical context was forgotten. Women, often excluded from formal religious education in earlier eras, found in Bhakti traditions a path that valued sincere emotion over scholarly learning. Saints arose from every social class, proving that realization remained possible regardless of birth, education, or worldly circumstances. Regional languages replaced Sanskrit as vehicles for expression, making teachings accessible to those who had been excluded by language barriers. Poetry and song became powerful means of transmission, allowing profound truths to reach hearts through beauty rather than argument. Despite these lights in the darkness, the overall trajectory remained downward. Warfare became more brutal as traditional codes of honor were abandoned. Soldiers began targeting civilians, destroying temples and schools, and using tactics that earlier eras would have considered unthinkable. Entire populations were enslaved or massacred as conquest became an end in itself, rather than a means to establish just governance. Environmental destruction accelerated as humanity lost its sense of connection with the natural world. Forests were cleared for short-term profit, without thought for long-term consequences. Rivers were polluted with waste that earlier generations would have considered offerings. The very air became thick with smoke from countless fires that consumed resources without creating lasting value. Social divisions hardened as society lost the understanding that all beings shared a common essence. Caste restrictions that had originally been flexible guidelines for social organization became rigid barriers that trapped individuals in narrow roles, regardless of their actual capabilities or inclinations. Discrimination based on birth, gender, or appearance became systematized rather than being recognized as ignorance to be overcome. Yet even as external conditions deteriorated, the inner reality remained unchanged. The same consciousness that had manifested in earlier eras as great teachers and heroes continued to exist within every heart, waiting to be discovered by those who sought it with sufficient sincerity and persistence. Some found this inner truth through meditation practices preserved in hidden lineages. Others discovered it through selfless service to those who suffered from the era's injustices. Still others encountered it through artistic expression that captured glimpses of beauty transcending the surrounding ugliness. Such intensity of Kali Yuga's challenges created unique opportunities for growth, where earlier eras had required lifetimes of gradual purification. The concentrated darkness of the Iron Period could burn away impurities rapidly for those who faced it with proper understanding. The absence of external support forced sincere seekers to develop inner strength that might never have emerged under easier conditions. As the era approached its culmination, signs began appearing that indicated the approach of its violent conclusion. Natural disasters increased in frequency and intensity, affecting regions that had previously been stable. Governments became increasingly corrupt and ineffective, unable to provide basic services or maintain order. Economic systems that had once created prosperity began generating widespread poverty instead. Religious institutions that had preserved some semblance of wisdom became thoroughly corrupted by worldly ambition. Teachers sold understanding for money. Students expected instant results without effort, and practices designed for liberation became tools for maintaining power over others. Widespread violence erupted as the breakdown of social order forced groups into fierce competition over dwindling resources. Families turned against each other. Communities dissolved into warring factions, and entire regions became ungovernable as local strongmen carved out temporary domains through force. Still, precisely when conditions seemed darkest, hope began stirring in the most unexpected places. Prophecies spoke of a final avatar who would appear when righteousness had nearly vanished from the earth. This promised deliverer would not come as a teacher or guide like previous incarnations, but as a warrior whose sword would cut through the accumulated darkness of eras. In the village of Shambhala, hidden in mountains where pure traditions had been maintained by descendants of sages, preparations began for this ultimate manifestation. Here, away from the corruption that had infected the rest of the world, the conditions necessary for such a birth were carefully preserved. The child who would become Kalki would be born to parents who had maintained perfect purity through generations of practice. His education would combine the martial skills necessary for his mission with the wisdom required to establish a new era of righteousness. Unlike previous avatars who had worked primarily through teaching and example, this final incarnation would transform the world through direct and overwhelming force. To those who could still recognize them, the signs of his coming would be clear and unmistakable. A white horse of supernatural beauty and power would appear, responding only to the touch of its destined rider. Weapons forged from metals unknown to ordinary smiths would manifest for the final battle. The very elements would align themselves with righteousness as nature itself prepared for the great cleansing. When the moment arrived, Kalki would emerge from his mountain sanctuary like a force of nature unleashed. Mounted on his divine steed and wielding a sword that could cut through illusion as easily as flesh, he would sweep across the earth like a purifying fire. No fortress would prove strong enough to resist him, no army large enough to oppose him, no deception clever enough to mislead him. Like wheat before the scythe, the corrupt rulers who turned kingdoms into instruments of tyranny would fall before his advance. False teachers who had sold understanding for worldly gain would find their pretenses stripped away in his presence. Merchants who had built fortunes through cheating and exploitation would see their empires crumble to dust. However, this would not amount to mindless destruction, but rather a just and careful judgment, recognizing the difference between the corrupt system and its victims. Sincere seekers who had maintained their integrity despite the era's pressures would be protected and elevated. Communities that had preserved authentic practice would become centers for the new civilization that would emerge from the ashes of the old. It would be a swift but decisive battle, enduring just enough to cleanse all corruption gathered throughout the prolonged darkness of Kali Yuga. When it ended, the earth would be renewed, ready to support a golden era that would surpass even the glories of the past. The survivors of this great purification would find themselves in a world transformed. The environment would be restored to its original beauty and abundance. Human society would be reorganized according to principles that recognized both individual worth and universal harmony. Learning that had been fragmenting and corrupting for thousands of years would be restored to its original unity and purity. Most importantly, the connection between humanity and the divine that had been progressively weakening throughout Kali Yuga would be fully re-established. Society would once again see the divine in the ordinary, understand their place in the universal order, and live in harmony with the natural laws that govern both individual development and social organization. Rather than simply reenacting the patterns of former golden eras, the new Satya Yuga would embody the lessons learned across countless cycles. The consciousness that emerged from the crucible of Kali Yuga would be strengthened and refined by its passage through darkness, capable of maintaining enlightenment under conditions that might have challenged earlier generations. Yet even this golden era would eventually give way to new cycles of decline and renewal. For such is the nature of time itself. The great wheel would continue turning, carrying consciousness through ever deeper experiences of separation and ever more complete reunions with its source. Each cycle would bring new challenges and new opportunities, ensuring that the universal drama would continue until every possible lesson had been learned and every potential fulfilled. For now, however, as Kali Yuga approached its climax, the promise of Kalki served as a beacon of hope for those who struggled to maintain their humanity amid the gathering darkness. No matter how complete the corruption might appear, no matter how hopeless the situation might seem, the understanding remained that light would ultimately triumph over darkness, truth over falsehood, and love over hatred. Patiently, the seven immortals kept vigil, prepared to intervene when the time came to renew the world. Hidden communities preserved the understanding and practices that would be needed to establish the new era. And somewhere in the mountains of Shambhala, the one who would end the night and herald the dawn prepared for his moment of destiny. As our journey through the vast landscape of Hindu mythology draws to a close, we can now step back and contemplate the extraordinary legacy these tales have bestowed upon human civilization. From the first stirring of creation in the Golden Lotus to the promised renewal that awaits at Kali Yuga's end, this epic has shaped not merely religious thought, but the fundamental ways entire cultures understand existence, purpose, and the relationship between individual life and universal truth. From Vishnu's 10 incarnations through the heroic struggles of Rama to the cowherd prince's wisdom on the battlefield, these narratives continue to beat within the hearts of more than 1 billion individuals today. Yet their influence extends far beyond any single religious framework, having seeded concepts and themes that flowered in philosophies, arts, and wisdom lineages across the globe. At the heart of this enduring power lies something more profound than mere storytelling. These myths serve as cosmic maps, charting the territories of awareness that every human being must eventually explore. The battles between devas and asuras mirror the conflicts between higher and lower impulses that rage within every heart. The avatar's descents into form reflect the eternal possibility that transcendence can manifest even within the most limiting circumstances. Through millennia, the transmission of these stories reveals humanity's remarkable ability to create living traditions that adapt yet preserve essential truths. From the oral recitations of Vedic seers to the palm leaf manuscripts of medieval scholars, from temple sculptures that brought myths to life in stone to the digital media that carries these tales around the world today, each generation has found new ways to ensure that ancient wisdom remains accessible to contemporary minds. The guru-disciple relationship that runs through every aspect of this epic represents more than just an educational method. It embodies the recognition that the deepest truths cannot be transmitted through words alone, but require a living connection between someone who has realized and another who seeks to understand. This principle of direct transmission has allowed Hindu lineages to maintain their vitality across countless generations, adapting their expression while preserving their essence. Consider how the abstract philosophical concepts embedded in creation narratives have given birth to practical disciplines that millions practice today. The recognition that awareness and energy dance together in eternal play inspired the development of yoga, which begins with physical postures, but aims toward the union of individual awareness with universal consciousness. The insight that sound carries creative power led to the science of mantra, where specific vibrations are used to transform both the speaker and the environment. Astronomical records revealed the exacting mathematical precision of cosmic cycles, capturing celestial motions with accuracy that continues to astonish today's scientists. The concept of Dharma as the underlying order of existence influenced legal systems that sought to align human law with natural justice. Even the architectural principles used in temple construction reflect mythological insights about how earthly forms can serve as bridges between material and transcendent realms. From these stories arises a sacred geography that has turned the Indian subcontinent's terrain into a vibrant epic. Rivers like the Ganga are not merely sources of water, but manifestations of grace flowing from celestial realms to earth. Mountains like Kailash and Govardhan are not just geological formations, but the dwelling places of gods and the sites of cosmic events. Cities like Ayodhya and Mathura are not simply urban centers, but the stages where eternal dramas unfolded in historical time. This mythological geography created pilgrimage customs that have endured for thousands of years, drawing seekers to places where the boundary between ordinary reality and sacred presence is held to be particularly thin. The Chardam Yatra connects four corners of the subcontinent in a journey that mirrors the soul's progress toward liberation. The 12 Jyotirlingas mark sites where Shiva's infinite nature manifested in finite form, offering devotees direct access to transcendent reality through physical pilgrimage. Emerging from these narratives, the festival calendar continues to guide the daily and seasonal rhythms of hundreds of millions. Diwali celebrates the return of Rama to Ayodhya, transforming a historical event into an annual renewal of the victory of light over darkness, in both outer circumstances and inner awareness. Holi commemorates the cowherd prince's playful love, turning the philosophical concept of joy into an explosion of color and celebration that dissolves social barriers and awakens childlike wonder. Navaratri honors the feminine power in her various forms, providing 9 nights for contemplating the different aspects of creative energy that both nurtures and destroys, that both conceals and reveals ultimate truth. Each festival serves not merely as cultural celebration, but as technology for transformation, using specific rituals, foods, and activities to attune participants to particular cosmic energies and states of awareness. Mythological roots shaped a literary heritage that still offers some of humanity's most cherished works. The Ramayana's exploration of duty, sacrifice, and ideal relationships has inspired countless adaptations across cultures from Indonesia to Thailand, each retelling discovering new layers of meaning while preserving the core insights about human nature and transcendent possibility. Mahabharata's unflinching examination of moral complexity in an imperfect world provided a template for epic literature that influenced narrative forms far beyond its origins. Its central message, that righteousness must be maintained even when the cost is everything one holds dear, speaks to universal human experiences of choice and consequence that transcend cultural boundaries. Bhagavad Gita's synthesis of different paths into a coherent philosophy of action has guided everyone from independence leaders to business executives, offering practical wisdom for maintaining inner peace while engaging fully with worldly responsibilities. Its teaching that one can be in the world but not of it has influenced seekers across lineages who seek to integrate contemplative insight with active service. Long before the rise of depth psychology, these tales explored inner realities with remarkable insight. The concept of karma as the law governing action and consequence provided a framework for comprehending how past choices shape present circumstances and future possibilities. The recognition that the mind creates its own reality through the quality of its attention influenced meditation practices designed to purify perception and align individual will with universal purpose. Through figures of gods, demons, and heroes embodying psychological energies, the epic offered intricate guides to the unconscious territory Western psychology has only recently approached with similar depth. The process of development described in these narratives, from initial awakening through various trials to final integration, parallels the individuation process that modern therapists recognize as essential for psychological health. Artistic forms nurtured by these mythological foundations have created some of humanity's most sublime expressions of beauty in service of truth. Classical dance forms like Bharatanatyam transform mythological tales into living sculptures that communicate emotions through precise gestures and movements. The dancer becomes a temporary embodiment of the gods and goddesses whose tales are being told, offering audiences direct experience of transcendent states through the medium of physical beauty. Musical lineages developed ragas and rhythmic cycles that mirror the cosmic harmonies described in creation myths. Each raga is held to embody particular qualities and to be most effective at specific times of day or seasons of the year, reflecting the insight that awareness and cosmos dance together in predictable patterns that can be harmonized through sound. Painting and sculpture forms depicted mythological scenes not merely as decoration, but as windows into other realms, using specific proportions, colors, and symbolic elements that were held to evoke corresponding inner states in viewers. Temples became total art forms where architecture, sculpture, painting, music, and dance combined to create environments that facilitated direct experience of the sacred. Beyond their religious significance, these tales continue to shape broader cultural ideals. The concept of the avatar, an embodiment of higher awareness responding to concrete needs, has inspired visions of leadership rooted in principle, yet grounded in real-world action. Rooted in a cyclical understanding of time, these myths offer a resilient framework. Unlike linear progress narratives that may collapse into hopelessness when change appears distant, the recognition that awareness evolves through repeated cycles of descent into limitation and return to freedom provides hope that current difficulties serve larger purposes and that apparent setbacks may be necessary preparation for future breakthroughs. With its embrace of opposing yet complementary principles, transcendence and immanence, masculine and feminine, action and grace, the epic has informed traditions of thought that resist the rigidity of binary approaches to truth. Modern science has found unexpected resonances with mythological insights that once seemed purely symbolic. The recognition that awareness and matter are aspects of a single reality parallels discoveries in quantum physics about the observer effect and the fundamental role of information in physical processes. The cyclical cosmology, with its vast time scales, anticipated astronomical discoveries about the birth and death of galaxies and the recursive nature of cosmic evolution. The insight that everything is interconnected through subtle relationships that are not always apparent on the surface has influenced ecological thinking and systems theory. The mythological recognition that human awareness and natural processes mirror each other has contributed to holistic approaches in fields ranging from medicine to agriculture that seek to work with natural patterns rather than against them. Yet perhaps the most profound legacy of these narratives lies not in their specific cultural expressions, but in their demonstration that human beings can create meaning-making systems of extraordinary depth and beauty. The epic of ancient India represents one of humanity's most successful attempts to weave together observation of natural processes, psychological insight, moral intuition, and transcendent aspiration into coherent tales that simultaneously entertain, educate, and transform. These narratives prove that it is possible to create cultures that honor both individual development and social responsibility, both rational analysis and intuitive wisdom, both earthly engagement and heavenly aspiration. They demonstrate that at its best, mythic thinking serves not as escape from reality, but as revelation of dimensions of reality that purely literal approaches might miss. Alive and evolving, these lineages still breathe meaning into the fabric of the present age. Their ability to inspire new artistic expressions, guide personal development, and contribute to solutions for global challenges testifies to their alignment with fundamental patterns of awareness and cosmos that transcend the particular historical circumstances of their emergence. As we face the challenges of an interconnected world, struggling with environmental crisis, social inequality, and the search for meaning in an increasingly technological civilization, these ancient tales offer resources that are both timelessly relevant and urgently needed. Their vision of awareness as the fundamental reality underlying all appearances provides a foundation for values that could guide humanity toward more sustainable and fulfilling ways of life. Their insight that individual liberation and universal welfare are ultimately the same goal offers hope for resolving the apparent conflict between personal development and social responsibility that troubles many contemporary seekers. Their recognition that transcendence is most fully realized through complete engagement with the world, rather than escape from it, provides guidance for those who seek fulfillment, while remaining actively committed to addressing worldly problems. Most importantly, these tales remind us that the ultimate purpose of existence is not mere survival or even happiness, but the gradual awakening of awareness to its own infinite nature. They suggest that every individual life, no matter how apparently insignificant, participates in a cosmic drama of such beauty and meaning that even its most difficult passages serve essential purposes in the larger unfolding. As the great wheel of time continues its eternal turning, carrying humanity through whatever challenges and opportunities await in the future, these ancient narratives remain available as sources of inspiration, guidance, and hope. They remind us that awareness has successfully navigated countless crises before, and that the same wisdom that created such magnificent epics continues to operate within human hearts, ready to manifest new expressions of truth, beauty, and goodness appropriate to each era's particular needs. Ancient India's heritage, then, is not simply a trove of old tales, but a living testament to humanity's enduring capacity to create meaning, seek purpose, and consciously join the cosmic dance of existence. In studying these narratives, we discover not only the beliefs of our ancestors, but the eternal potentials that continue to exist within our own awareness, waiting to be awakened through sincere seeking and faithful practice. The tale that began before time itself continues in each moment of aware existence, offering every individual the opportunity to participate directly in the ongoing creation of reality through the quality of their choices, the depth of their insight, and the love they bring to their relationships with all of life. In this sense, the epic never ends, but simply transitions from ancient narrative to contemporary experience, from tale to living reality, from entertainment to transformation.